Thank you. All right, then I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is the Hartford Subcommittee of the MARB. It is Thursday, January 26th, and the time is 10:03. For opening comments this morning, I would like to welcome our newest member to the MARB today. Andrea, I don't see you. If you're able to put your camera on, that will be helpful so we can introduce you to everybody. Andrea has been designated from Treasurer Russell as his designee, and Andrea is the Chief of Staff over the Treasurer's office. The Treasurer has also appointed a alternate designee, which is Kevin Alvarez, who is not with us today, but Andrea is here to be able to represent the Treasurer's office. And so I want to welcome her to the MARB.
Thank you. Can you see me now? Because it looks like my camera's on, but it's...
There it is. I can see you now. Perfect.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I think that it would be helpful for Andrea, just a quick introduction is if everybody, the MARB members could quickly say hello, and so that she is familiar with those today that are from the MARB, and then, you know, maybe even a quick introduction from Hartford. And then as the presenters come through, you'll introduce yourself for the topics of discussion. MARB members?
Yeah, Mark Waxenberg online on the phone.
Bob
Mark's
White,
been with us. Yeah.
Bob White on the camera. I met Professor Quinnipiac.
Thank you. And Hartford?
I can never hit the mute button at the right time. Good morning. I'm Leanne Rawls. I'm the CFO for the City of Hartford.
Good morning. Julian Freund, Budget Director for the city.
All right, Andrea, any opening comments this morning?
No, just lovely to meet all of you and looking forward to working together.
Sounds great. Thank you. Well, we have a full agenda today, and we can start with approval of the minutes of November the 17th. If I could get a motion for approval.
So moved.
Thank you, Bob.
If I was there,
Can I have-
second.
Thank you. You were there.
Okay.
Any discussion? I see none. Okay. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay, thank you. All right, the minutes have been approved. On to the next agenda item, which is review and discussion of the FY22 audit reports. I believe the city has with them today is Clifton Larson and Allen, and Leslie Zoll I saw is the partner at Clifton, and I believe that she will be presenting the financials. Leanne, do you have any opening comments before we turn it over to Leslie?
Well, I will say that this year was rather difficult with the vacancies and the transition of staff just coming into the city and, you know, losing several key members of my team to retirement. But we pulled through. It got a little rough at times, but we were able to pull together and cross the finish line with the help of CLA. They were great partners to the city. Very excited to work with them. So, and we've got pretty good news to present. So we'll happily turn it over to Leslie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen, Kim, if that's okay.
Please do.
If you could let me know if you could see that presentation with the bike.
We can.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. My name is Leslie Zoll. I'm the principal in the city of Hartford. And I'm here today to present the audit results for June 30th, 22 year end. I have with me my director, Grace, who's worked side by side with the city team this year to get the audit out on time. So she's here with me today as well.
Welcome.
Good morning.
So in terms of my presentation this morning, I'm going to go just share with you the terms of our engagement that we do for the city each year. Just a summary of our audit results. I am going to go over some financial highlights for you this morning. Go through some of the state single audit results and the testing that we performed. The federal single audit is not yet issued. We have one open item from the city. Once we receive that, we can go through our internal control, quality control system and get that issued for the city. Then I just want to go over some required communication and upcoming GASBs. So in terms of what an audit is and what we're responsible for, we do express opinions on whether or not the basic financial statements are presented in accordance with GAAP. We also express an in relation to opinion on the state and federal award schedules. And we express an opinion on compliance related to any major programs that we test throughout that audit process in accordance with not only uniform guidance, but also the State Single Audit Act. We do not opine on internal control. However, we are required to report any significant internal control issues over the financial statements as a whole, as well as any internal control issues that we saw with the state and federal programs that we test. So in terms of the financial statement audit results, the city of Hartford did receive a clean opinion. That's an unmodified opinion that you'd want to receive each and every year. The city of Hartford has done so yet again. There's no findings, significant deficiencies, or material weaknesses to report to you in terms of internal control and compliance. On the state single audit side, there also was an unmodified opinion on those programs, which we'll discuss later in the presentation. No compliance findings or any issues of internal control to report to you today.
Great news.
So this year I have given you a snapshot of the front exhibits just so that you can kind of see what they look like, but I'm going to go through some just high level financial information for you for the city for the year ended 6/30/22. The slide that you see up there is exhibit 1 in the financial statements, the statement of net position. This is what we consider government-wide statements. They're full accrual basis statements. They include all of your funds with the exception of your pension and OPEB trust funds. As far as the government activities go, that net position increased 59.8 million. It is now at 695.1 million. I do want to note to you this morning that we did issue GASB 87 this fiscal year. There's two things in response to GASB 87 that has changed from the previous fiscal year. On the lessee side, the city has added capital assets right of use of $9 million at the beginning of the year, as well as lease liability of $9 million during the year. So that's why you see on my slide there, capital assets decreased 8.2 million. That's after that 9 million add to the capital assets at the beginning of the year. Long-term debt increased 7.6 million. also included in that, and I'll explain that in the next slide as well. On the lessor side, the city added accounts receivable of $2 million and a deferred inflow of $2 million. As far as the business type activities column, that includes all of your enterprise funds combined. Net position decreased 102,000 for the year. You have a net position, the city has a net position of 18.8 million. And then we just wanted to note that the Hartford Parking Authority had revenues and expenditures of 5.9 million. This slide relates to the balance sheet, the governmental funds. This is on a modified basis of accrual, so it does not include long-term receivables and long-term payables. Each column is a major fund, which is opined on by us as a major fund. That non-major governmental funds column is part of the aggregate remaining opinion unit, which includes internal service funds and pension trust funds as well in that opinion unit. I'd just like to go over some highlights with the general fund for the city. Currently, fund balance increased $6.8 million to $38.7 million. They had positive budgetary expenditure results of 12.5 million. On the revenue side, 3.6 million less than was budgeted. Tax collections remain strong, not 96.09 versus 96.18 from the previous year. And then this slide is just kind of walking you through some of the other major funds on Exhibit 3. Capital Improvement Fund increased 12.6 million for the year. Community Development Loan and Grant increased 416,000. You have the Debt Service Fund that decreased 3.5 million. Educational grants increased 11.5 million. American Rescue Plan Fund decreased 4.4 million. And then you have that non-major governmental funds column, which includes all your non-major funds, that increased 31.7 million. Moving on to your proprietary type funds. Your proprietary type funds are full accrual basis of accounting. These are standalone funds from the business type activities standpoint. Your Hartford Stadium Authority Fund increased 332,000 from the previous fiscal year. That non-major enterprise fund column that you see on the slide represents two of the non-major enterprise funds of the city. Hartford Parking Facilities decreased 161,000 for the year, and the golf course decreased 273,000 for the year. And then that last column on that statement of net positions, the internal service funds, that represents that column in the financial statements represents 5 different internal service funds of the city. Workers' comp increased 800,000 for the year. Liability and property damage increased 401,000 during the year. Then you had Metro Hartford that decreased 299,000 for the year. Retirees increased 511,000 and actives increased $304,000. And then the final exhibit on the financial statements represents the fiduciary funds, which is your the city's pension and OPEB trust funds. The MARB fund decreased 179,000 for the year. Retirement allowance fund, and these are unfunded funds. That was 7,000 for employer contributions and benefits paid. On the Fireman's Relief Fund, 26,000 was paid, and police fund was 158,000 for the year. The OPEB trust fund, that net position decreased to $2.8 million, which is not bad. We've seen obviously decreases across the board on these trust funds due to the market. So I just want to highlight your net OPEB and net pension liabilities. So on the city side for OPEB, your net OPEB liability is 289 million, and on the Board of Ed side, it's 3.9 million. In terms of net pension liabilities, the MRF plan is 63% funded at 596.4 million. On your unfunded plans, you have a combined net pension liability of 1.3 million. And for the 415 plan, 137,000. And then your cost sharing plan, your MERS plan, has a liability of 22.5 million, which is their allocated share to the city for their participation in that plan. Moving on to the state single audit, state awards expended during the year were $408.3 million for the city. We do a risk-based approach on what we test each year with rotating programs in accordance with the State Single Audit Act. This year, we tested the Magnet School Grant, Alliance District, and the new tiered payment in lieu of taxes grant. For all three of those programs, there's no findings to report. The city received unmodified opinions on those three programs. No internal control issues to report. In terms of just communication that we like to share with everyone every year after the audit process is over, we did adopt GASB 87. As I indicated, the city did have I want to thank Leanne's team for, giving us the information so that we can assist them in implementing the standard. It's not an easy standard to implement. There was a lot of questions back and forth, but we did get it done and did get it done on time. As far as significant estimates within the financial statements, capital assets, useful lives are always a significant estimate. If you change those useful lives, you change the depreciation on those assets, which changes the values. In terms of net pension liability and net OPEB liability, those are estimates made from actuarial assumptions. If you change those assumptions, it changes the values. The new thing this year related to GASB 87 and that implementation is there is a significant estimate related to those values, because on the financial statements, those values for those leases are on a present value calculation. And so that incremental borrowing rate that the city used is an estimate. And if that rate were to change, it would change the values of those leases that are currently on the financial statements. We had no disagreements with management. As Leanne said, it was a difficult year for them with turnover, but I feel that her team worked extremely hard to get what we needed on time so that we could issue on time. We are not aware that management consulted with any other accountants. There were no difficulties we encountered that weren't resolved. No one corrected misstatements and no independent issues with the city. And then just to share with you some of the upcoming GASBs, I would like to just say GASB Statement 96 on IT arrangements is going to be another one that's very similar to 87 and will require some additional information, some calculations and some analysis. So get ready for that one because that one's going to be more robust. The other ones are really strictly related to specific transactions, and I don't think will play a part too much in delays for the audit, but I did want to mention Statement 96. Even as we go into the next 2 years, there's really not too much. The GASB's been reviewing older GASB's and just clarifying other standards. So there's not too much in play right now other than Statement 96. Is there any questions?
I'll look out to the members first. I don't see any hands up. I did have a question on your financial highlights when you mentioned Hartford parking facility and the golf, and both of those items, I would probably say taking a net position decrease. And do you happen to know what the impact of that was? I didn't get to dive into it yet, or Leanne.
Yeah, the golf fund really is an issue of timing because in order to match up with our fiscal year, we have to split their busiest season in half.
Okay.
So as we know, like, spring to fall is a busy time for golf, and depending on where the expenses lie for the winter before. One of the reasons for the decrease is that this year, the grounds maintenance, the team that we have in place never had a full crew of folks on staff. They just had a lot of vacancies, and this was the first year that they ended the fiscal year with a full team in place. So salary for grounds maintenance went up, and of course, just overall increases in fees all around was an effect for golf. But we still are experiencing increased round play.
Yeah,
So
that's what
hoping that keeps up.
that's what I recall was the messaging. So that's when it was kind of, I wasn't expecting that output, that outcome.
Mhm.
And any comments on the parking?
Parking is, so this is the umbrella fund, so it's not the actual authority that is a component unit of the city. And they
Oh.
run the day-to-day operations
Okay.
of parking. So you see them on, is it Exhibit 4?
Yeah.
Where-
Or,
Or one of the exhibits?
I thought it was 5. It's noted on 5 and 6. I'm just looking
Okay.
at I'm looking at the PowerPoint. I'm not looking at the
Yeah.
financials.
So, so this is the umbrella company, which really houses all of the debt payments and all of the debt and all of the fixed assets. So what you're seeing is a result of really payment on the debt, the interest expense component, and then depreciation.
To congratulate the city for getting their statements done on time and implementing 87 and going through that, because I do know and heard throughout the year how rigorous that was. So that was the other comment, and kudos to all of you, because I know what it's like to go through statements and to do it with not a lot of resources. So and I know that it takes a village to get that done. So kudos to Hartford and also to CLA and your team.
Thank you. I will tell you, Kim, that when Leslie sent us the final copy of the act, for her title in the email was "It Takes a Village."
Was it really? And I didn't know that. Great minds. All right. No other questions from the members. Last chance. Mark, I heard you breathe, but I didn't hear your voice.
No, I'm all set. To me, it's a positive report. I still have concerns about the OPEB liabilities, but
Yep.
we've discussed that in the past and we'll continue to discuss it.
Yep, I agree. All right. And we did not see any findings. We did not see, are you planning a management letter?
Not at this
I did.
time.
Okay. Because I didn't, I know that there was one last year but I'm assuming
And
that was
that one comment was resolved, Kim.
That's what I thought. Yeah. All right. And do you have a timeline on the federal or not yet?
Not yet. I mean, as I said, there's only one open item, so as
Yep.
soon as we can resolve that one issue, it will go into our internal control review process and should not be that long. I'm anticipating maybe a couple of weeks, and that's probably it.
Okay. So even if I gave it to the month by the end of February, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, Leslie, thank you and your team. And we can then move on to the next
you.
item on the agenda. And that is review and discussion and possible action of a labor contract.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, Grace. And with that labor contract, who do you have from the city to present on this?
Our very new budget director. You may know him.
I do. I know him quite well, but he's sitting in the wrong chair. That's all I will say. All right. Do you want to give us a lowdown of this? Your attorney's not going to do that, right, Julian?
No, I can give you a
Okay.
briefing and then we'll take it from there.
Very good.
So you should have the MOU itself and a handful of supporting documents that go along with that. So this is an agreement, an MOU with Local 1716. And it's similar to an agreement that was approved by the MARB back in the June timeframe with this same group, where the salary schedules for a number of positions that have been very difficult to fill were adjusted upward. And in the last case, I think we covered 10 different positions. This MOU is a bit more narrowly focused, and it affects the Public Works maintainers 3 and 4 and team leaders. And these positions, in particular, the maintainer 3 positions, have been very difficult to fill. And you can see that we provided a bit of vacancy data to show that we have been running with a large number of vacancies in this group. And so the adjustment to the salary tables is, naturally intended to make the city more competitive in recruiting for these positions. The impact in the current fiscal year is about $200,000, which is covered in the budget. And going forward, annualized at around $500,000. And so we'll see that built into next year's budget as well. And that is it. It's fairly straightforward and narrowly focused MOU. So we'll try to answer any questions you have about this one. And then this one would fall under that 44-day window for the MARB to act from the date it was signed, which was earlier this week.
Thank you. Any questions from the members?
This is Mark. I'm just
Yes.
surprised you have those minimal amount of vacancies because you are clearly not competitive with the surrounding communities. And quickly examining some of the requirements here, I don't think there's anything other than the CDL license, which of course is for some difficult to deal with. But no, I think that in order to maintain the city infrastructure, these positions need to be filled, and that's a driving force to make Hartford a more competitive place, if you will, residentially and commercially. And they do need to be competitive. And coming out of their very difficult financial position, I think it's necessary now to get them back into a competitive position salary-wise with their public works division. So I think it's a good move, and probably one that's going to need to be upgraded as time goes on based on the data that I see before me. So I have no objection, certainly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for your insight. And I definitely echo your thoughts on when looking at the market analysis. Knowing that you have this built into your 5-year plan is important. Any other questions? Mr. White, I'm going to call you. No, you're fine. Oh, you're off. You're off. You're on mute again. I did not do it either.
Yeah, it's this AI stuff. Yeah, no, I'm fine. You need a motion?
I do need a motion. I am looking for that. Thank you. So moved. Is that what I heard, Mr. White?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I'll second.
How about
Second.
Oh, I'm going to take Andrea. Thank you. And any discussion, further discussion or questions? I hear none. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Bob, that was an aye.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. All right, the motion carries and the recommendation is approved, and we'll be ready to go forth to the full MARB within the timeline. Mr. Freund, yes. Thank you for keeping us on task and wearing 2 hats. So we don't have to continue to stay in looking at the statute and the rules is very helpful, as he can continue to help us out in that area. We're on to the next item on the agenda, which is the budget mitigation measures. I'm going to look to the Board of Ed first, and Chief Penn, if you are, Mr. Penn, are you on still with us?
I am.
Perfect. Do you want to share your screen?
I can do that.
Perfect. And you can walk us through your mitigation plan, and then we'll move over to the city second.
So while I'm doing that, I'm going to actually take
Okay.
a minute, since the auditors didn't say anything, to acknowledge the efforts that Maureen and I put in on the audit as well.
I'm very sorry.
I will tell you, I don't think I've worked that hard on a balance sheet. I can't tell you how long trying to get that stupid thing right. But
I am very sorry, and everybody should be sorry that you were left out. So
right.
That is part of.
We spend $500 million a year. It's no big deal. It's all good. Don't worry.
No. I know you do, and you are not part of the little village.
All right. If everybody can see that.
Thank you for reminding us, and we definitely did not want to discount your efforts.
No worries. No worries. All right. Can you see the screen?
Can.
All right. You can see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. So I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about deficit mitigation from our end, and really the factors that affect 22-23 are also affecting our 23-24 budget development, as you might expect right now. You've heard some of this come up in other meetings, but I just want to kind of lay out sort of where we are right now and what we're doing to close the gap sort of in both budget years. So one of the things that we're looking at is a decline in our projected revenue and an increase in our expenses. And of course, those are going in the opposite directions that you want to have them go. The biggest drivers on the expense side is tuition costs. And in particular, we've noted that CREC, we have 300 more students attending CREC schools this year than we had last year. And we are also in the midst of a major tuition increase that CREC is imposing on the local districts as well. The total tuition change is over $8 million projected into 23-24 compared to where we are now. Transportation costs, what we're seeing is a lot of door-to-door transportation being written into the IEPs for our special education students. So even though we've got savings elsewhere in transportation, that special education piece is rising over 7 million. And so we're trying to mitigate that, at least put a damper on it as best we can, while still respecting the fact that an IEP is a legal document and should reflect what's necessary for the child's educational needs. Labor costs, mostly on the fringe side, up another 2 million. And then you've got just the normal inflation, right? You know, we're seeing something, well, we were in good position on electricity. We're not on natural gas. I mean, we're experiencing the same price increases there that everybody else is. And so it's a bad confluence of stuff happening at the same time. And you'll see here, you know, just the change in revenue that we're pointing out. And in particular, I spiked out on the right-hand side the change in the state magnet operating grant. That's the money that we receive from the suburban students that attend our magnet schools. We receive $13,615 per student that attend our schools, and naturally, our resident students that go to those schools, we have ECS. They're not a factor in the grant. But when we looked at the number of students that we thought we would have that are suburban students attending our magnet schools versus what we have right now, it's a drop of almost 500 students. And there's a variety of factors that are driving all that. So that has a major impact on our operating grant that goes to fund a lot of the portion of the cost that we have in those magnet schools. You know, I kind of broke out for you on the next slide, sort of where we are in terms of projections on the total increase in expenses. And you'll see the two items that I highlighted, the three on the prior slide, the fringe benefit change, the transportation change, the tuition change. And then we've got other stuff that sort of plays in there. And it's a fair amount of like some small increases and some bigger ones. Professional services, for instance, we know our share of our IT expenses through MHIS are going to increase pretty dramatically because MHIS has now added on services in the wake of the cybersecurity breach that they had a couple of years ago and the audit that followed on after that, in the additional security measures that they're putting on on all of our systems. So that reflects in some degree our increased cost associated with that. So the overall first pass of this was about a $21 million increase. And you know, I pointed out to folks, 21 million is a lot. When you look at an absolute number, it's bigger than some districts' entire budget. But to a degree, it's also only 5%, right? So I kind of look at it, we're 95% of the way there. We got to figure out the last 5%. So how are we getting after the 5%? And this is something that we've shared with our board. We've shared it with our school leadership teams. We're looking at all the vacant positions that we have in the budget for next year, and there's over 400 of them. We're looking at consolidating programs, platforms, non-personnel expenses wherever possible, particularly with an emphasis on central office, and you can see the estimated range of that impact. If we have to, we will leave a task out there to be identified in the 23-24 year. That's not my preference, but for something that would represent about 0.5% of what the budget is, I've been able to invoke that in prior districts and in other organizations where I've worked, and left it open to we got to close that during the year. And as I pointed out to our board, you know, we're 18 months plus away from the full expenditures of these monies. There's a lot that can change in an 18-month period that will give us better confidence in our ability to close that gap. This next one, we've got a fair amount of ESSER funds that are still remaining. And in particular, we've got a fair amount of ESSER funds that were positions that we intended to fund through ESSER that we have not been able to fill. And as a result of that, we know that there's a potential unspent amount for those vacant positions in 23-24 on the order of magnitude of about 5.2 million. So that's why I'm using a range of between 4 and 6. And then the last piece is we're going to go back and look at the revenue assumptions just to make sure we weren't overly conservative, particularly with anything that we receive from foundations, anything that we would receive from some of our billing that we do to other districts. And so when you look at it, we're kind of looking at a 18 to 26 million is what we think the range of the opportunity is, right? So the 24 million that we're chasing is right in the middle of that. Now, most importantly, we share this in every public venue that we've had the opportunity to say it. We don't anticipate having a RIF in order to close this gap, right? There's too many vacancies. There's too much turnover that happens every summer. We don't expect to be touching people that are in seats currently as a means of closing this gap. And frankly, since we're self-funded when it comes to unemployment anyway, if you touch somebody who's already in a seat, you're going to be paying out the unemployment benefits as a result of that. And you almost got to lay off 2 for 1 to get the salary save that you were after in the first place. And that's why, if you go back to the top of the page, why we're so kind of committed to looking at this from a vacancy perspective, as opposed to touching it somebody who's in a position today. All right. So one of the things that we announced, and this impacts both closing the gap for 22-23 and 23-24, is we announced a hiring freeze on all full-time vacancies in the general fund, except for, and these are important, right? Because we want to say, doesn't affect anything that is funded by special funds or grants. Full-time classroom teachers, that's not what we're looking to freeze. Positions that maintain compliance with our mandated services, and think specifically about special education services where you would have a special education teacher or a paraprofessional. Now, we've talked about an equity-based starter budget. It's our way of allocating sort of general fund stuff. And so it's like if something changes and puts them out of compliance with their minimums in that starter budget, we would approve the hire. So as an example, in that starter budget, we say that every school's got a principal. If the principal is funded by general funds and for some reason we lose that principal, well, the minimum standard would be we have a principal in that school, we would approve that hire, right? So now we've also created a way of having a review process where it's needed to make sure that, hey, are you sure you need this position to rehire and that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of checks and balances taking place before it gets to our HR office to say, go ahead and post a position. And what we actually did is a logic tree around how to consider, do we need this position or not? I'm not going to take you through this full thing, but if you ever remember like kind of basic computer programming, like where processes stop and where they continue, that's what we tried to do here. And the very first question is, do you need this position to maintain operational effectiveness in your building? And the answer is no, don't hire the position, right? If the answer is yes, then keep going through the rest of the tree to see where this takes you. So as you can imagine, there was some strong feedback around the freeze and that kind of thing. And I think we got far enough along with the principals and other school leaders around the district to understand, look, we're not saying we're freezing every position. What we're saying is like, we got to follow this process to say, does this position need to go back in the budget or not? Or can we hold it open for the balance of the year to close the current year deficit? And if we need to focus on vacancies for next year, we want to make sure that we have that vacancy available to us as a potential elimination from the budget. So there's a lot of stuff happening internally to try to close this gap. We have an answer back to our board. The next presentation to them is, I think, on February 6th, with the hope that we can have the BOE approve the budget sometime later that month. I want to say the date's around the 21st or so. And if you remember from last year, one of the reasons that we're going out early is that it puts us in a position during the hiring period, particularly as college students are coming out with their teaching degrees and looking for their licenses, so that we're not going out with qualified offers that basically say subject to budget approval, right? Because if a candidate's got 2 offers in hand, one has that doesn't, there are equitable offers between the 2, they're probably taking the one that's safer, frankly, right?
Sure.
So anyway, I wanted to take everybody kind of through how we're going about trying to close the gap, both in terms of next year's budget and in particular this hiring freeze that's affecting the 22-23 range. Now, I have a current projection, I think I shared it in the last monthly financials, of around a $13 million deficit for 22-23. I would say because of the vacancy level that we had baked in there at that point, that's probably a conservative figure, right? I do think there's an opportunity that vacancies are quite a bit higher. I think we're running close to 11%, something along those lines for 22-23 right now. But the funding source of the vacancies obviously becomes important too, right? If it's ESSER, it's not going to be treated the same way in our budget in terms of closing that gap. If there are restrictions on how we spend the money, it's going to have a difference in that. If it's federal special education dollars, you got to be careful around making sure you're doing maintenance of equity and maintenance of effort around those grants. But I did want to convey to the committee here today that there's a lot happening to try and close this gap, and I think in the next 30 days there's going to be a lot more to share in terms of our progress on that.
Fantastic. Thank you for at least having an eyesight and a vision and working towards closing that gap. and I have faith in you.
Well, thank you.
Now, I understand that you're in the vacancy part. You're attacking that first section, which is going to get you the 7 to 9. And even if I take the lower end of that equation of being the $7 million of the 13 million, that cuts you in half immediately. I'm just taking it at a high number, okay?
Right.
And the rest of them, as you go down, I'm going to say the food chain of saying what those other items are that you're looking at for savings. You know, is it realistic that you're going to get there
for this year? Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like we know we have a revenue hard spot in this year that's probably worth about 3 million that wasn't in that projection of 13 million, for instance. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Good. That brings it down even further. Okay.
Yeah. Told you last time. It's like I've never ended a year in a deficit. I don't plan on starting here.
I know. And like I said, I do have faith, and but I can't tell you that I haven't heard stories like this in my time in my career, and you know, the wheels came right off the bus.
Yeah, listen, it's like I don't know what's coming at me tomorrow, right? So it's like I may come back to you, right? Because that's always the big fear. It's like some other thing happens, right?
Well, yeah, because some of these things that are thrown at you at the last minute, and you know, even CREC, if you knew that ahead of time of what was coming in, that shouldn't be impacting you this year, and it's not already part of your budget.
But what I couldn't see, even if I did know about the rate increase, and I didn't plan on 300 more kids going to CREC than they did last year. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, I always kind of cringe and hold my breath during a legislative session, especially the long ones, because you never know where that stuff's going to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any questions? And I'm going to say Mark first, because usually he's my education guy.
Well,
on this board,
I don't think there's anything. I don't want to say surprising. I said the difficulty with it is the unknown factors that Chief Penn has to put up with, a la the CREC and the special ed funds and transportation. Obviously, the concern is you don't create such a diminishment of services at the local level that drives people to the CRECs of the world or to the other outside, which costs money. So it's a balancing act, and hopefully the legislature this year will recognize that they need to adjust appropriately the funding levels, particularly in the urban cores and in the choice school districts and special education. I just don't see. I see the task very, very difficult to achieve on an annual basis with the unknowns, and you can adjust, as Chief Penn has done, to maintain a balanced budget. But my concern is, in doing so, at what expense? In other words, are you creating more of a driver for an exodus of students rather than an influx of students because of programmatic loss and or whatever those vacant positions provide that may or may not be necessary? And then the other issue, of course, is something we've talked about extensively, which is the accountability within this whole choice school district special education process, which is a clear driving factor for Hartford. They're paying the bill and asked to write the checks with basically very little ability to have oversight and or accountability on the receiving school district, whether it be CREC, Simsbury, or somebody else. Yeah. And those are policy decisions that need to be dealt with at the legislative level. And I'm hopeful that the Hartford delegation, when briefed or if briefed by the school board and its people, can bring that to the legislature too. There's always been that historically for 40 years. This whole CREC, I'm going to call it empire, that began in the late 80s, early 90s, between its profit and nonprofit division, has been untouchable for a variety of different reasons. But it needs to be addressed. Otherwise, Hartford is going to keep chasing those monies, trying to balance its budget on possibly on the backs of the students attending Hartford, and that's just not a good thing.
So if I can add to that, if you don't mind, we're aware of pending legislation that's going to be reintroduced into this session that did not get passed last year that addresses some of those long-term concerns for us. Last year was House Bill 5283. I don't know if it's going to come back in the same number. We're tracking that, and to the extent that we can have advocacy from MARB as that moves forward as well. There is one other thing that I wanted to bring up, that we're aware of something called a tuition offset grant that is new this year, that we're trying to figure out the mechanism that Hartford will receive funding under that. I think it's designed to be financial support that for school districts that have significant expenditures in the CREC region or in the Chef region that are being paid to CREC or to learn one of the other RESCs that are out there. I'm having, frankly, a difficult time deciphering where somebody goes and applies for that. Is it entitlement? Does it just show up? Or is there some other mechanism? We're trying to contact the State Department of Education, understand that mechanism. And the last piece is, you're 100% right that you cannot force a change in the services and the programmatic stuff that you offer in a way that leaves you even less competitive versus the other market forces that are out there. Like it or not, open choice has created open market competition for students. And with parents having that choice, they can go to one of the open choice districts. They can go to a CREC. They can go to a Learn. And parents are becoming educated shoppers around that. And we've had the internal conversation around, we need to make sure that the product that we take to market is attractive enough to continue to attract students to their home schools, and to pull in residential students as well to address the concerns around Chef.
Well, I don't envy your position, but it's one that has been, it's a bubble. It's a bubble, and it's getting bigger, and hopefully, because of the fiscal position the state is in, they can hopefully address it before it bursts. And you do have a Speaker of the House who is from Hartford. Hopefully he'll be receptive to some of this. And of course, the head of the Finance Committee, who's now decided to run for mayor. Hopefully you have some political influence to deal with the issues that you've raised, because it is a challenge.
Exactly. Thank you.
Mr. White.
Yes, thank you. Just to follow up on Mark, why did the legislation not pass last term? And just secondly, as a comment, can we keep this as an agenda item, which is the status of the legislation?
Sure.
Just a quick update, because and you kind of let us know when we can lob in something in support, because this is a systemic problem. At some point you're going to run out of magic tricks, despite your record.
Yeah. It kind of feels like there's no more rabbits left to pull out at this point. I agree with you. I will tell you that, and this is my personal observation, right? I don't know the inner workings of the capital system as well as some others here do, but the bill cleared appropriations. The bill cleared the Education Committee. The bill was sent to the House floor, but never taken up for a vote. And what I can't tell is if that they ran out of time in the session and therefore couldn't give it a full debate, but recognizing that this was going to increase the budget in that current fiscal year from whenever it was adopted, right? And I almost wonder if they didn't want to commit to that in the second year of the biennial budget. And that's why I'm sort of hopeful that as they're laying out a 2-year view, it's in a better position, because the intent was to have all these changes that were in that bill take place in the 24-25 fiscal year. And that's now in scope on the biennial budget, whereas last year would not have been. Again, that's one person's observations, but that's what I kind of concluded.
Well, thank you.
It always is a fresh slate when you have the longer session, obviously, and you're right. The budget adjustment session is very difficult only because of the hesitancy. They don't want to put anything in for long-term liabilities in the second year of a budget. So it's a good time to raise those issues. And I might say that, Kim, that one of the influencing factors obviously would be Jeff from OPM because he is going to be intimately involved along with the governor, obviously, as his designee. So having Jeff articulate MARB's position could help. I'm not sure that membership, even though we do have some, each of our backgrounds has some, whatever influence might be there, should we testify at some point. The OPM secretary, along with the governor, could go a long way to help remedy some of the issues that presently exist. And I'm sure they're having those debates now. At least I hope they are, but based on my history of the whole situation, I'm sure that they're probably doing that now.
I'm sure. Thank you. All right. Any other final discussion? And thank you for.
Oh, the last one, if I might, Kim.
Yes, you may.
Chief Penn, obviously in the paper was the incident with that student activity fund, which is not, unfortunately, unusual around the state at times for, I don't want to use the term, that much of a negative term, but lack of oversight allows for things to happen. Have you, or based on what's transpired, has there been any intervening by the school board within its power to create any policies, procedures, or oversight for these types of funds moving forward?
Well, actually, I guess the most important thing is we already have them, right? So when those policies and procedures are not followed, is when you start having the issues come up.
All right. So you had them, but somebody decided to turn the page.
Correct.
That's unfortunate. So is there
to more directly answer your question, in August, kind of when we were in the throes of all this, I went in front of the administrators, including all the principals, and said, look, you need to take this stuff seriously because you're, like it or not, you're the treasurer of these funds. That's how we look at this. Yeah. And you will be held accountable for what transpires inside those accounts during your tenure here if you are the designated administrator over those accounts. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate, but I guess the flip side is the process worked, right? Our level of oversight on this thing detected what was going on, and we addressed it. And you can imagine going into a situation where basically there had been no record keeping at all. We literally found a stack of cash, right? I mean, it's like we found stacks of cash. Somebody tried to deposit $31,000 on 3 different days. 24,000 was in cash, right? And so we're trying to unravel all that with no records or insufficient records, I guess, to be fair. So there has been some commentary around the length of time it took us to perform that audit. But literally going into a disaster and trying to unravel that, and trying to say, let's try and put some order back on top of this thing and figure out what's going on. And then, my role in finance is to turn the findings over to the labor area here and say, this is what we found. Disciplinary action comes from your side, but this is serious, and I think the outcome for both individuals involved was serious.
Yeah, like I said, I've gone through situations where this has happened before, as you may know, situations. It's just one of those, I don't want to say slush funds, but the old days it was a slush fund. And I'm glad to see that you were able to pick it up and move forward.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, over to the city then, and we will get an update on their mitigation.
I'm sorry, can I just?
Yes, please, Andrea.
That's okay. Yeah, I wanted to maybe ask the question in a different way. I mean, certainly.
To Chief Penn?
Yes.
Okay.
You indicated that the process worked and it was uncovered, but I guess the follow-up question is, are there other sort of guardrails that can be put in place that would prevent this from happening going forward in the first place?
So all of the student activity funds by our policies are required to put reconciliation reports in front of us on a monthly basis. And we can see all the activity transpiring both in their bank accounts and in their accounting records. The other big thing that we're doing is we're changing the accounting system for student activity funds in the very near future. We're going to something that, frankly, is a bit easier for them to use than QuickBooks is, and the systems that we're using right now, but gives us kind of a little bit more ability in live fashion to be able to see what's transpiring at any given time. In the case of HMTCA, the school in question, my office overtook the oversight of that account in the summertime when we discovered that, right? And there will be a time in the future where we feel like the new principal there, the new SAF administrator there, when those people are named and trained adequately on how to do this, we may release some of that oversight of the account back to the school, right, where it should be. But I think to some degree, and you could kind of imagine how this would be the case, disciplinary action coming out of something like this is a bit of a wake-up call to everybody else, that, hey, you know what, we really do pay attention to this stuff. We're not kidding around when we say it. And I've had numerous emails and phone calls from principals in the wake of that August meeting and the things that have been in the media when they will ask questions before taking a step that they're unsure about. But you know, look, lack of common sense in using checks like that to cover staff expenditures and that kind of thing, lack of oversight, you know, forged signatures. I mean, all that kind of stuff strays into an area that I think most decent people don't do on a regular basis. But that's why we have the oversight that we do to say, okay, something just doesn't smell right here. Something doesn't look right here. Let's go do a deeper dive.
Thank you so much for that additional context.
Sure thing.
Thank you. All right, let's move over to the city. Leanne or Julian? Oh, Julian. Okay.
Yeah, I'll click through this. So this is an update that or a report where typically we'll update selected sections based on, you know, any activity that's taken place over the last reporting period, as a number of these are really sort of long-term initiatives that the departments or you know, sort of cross-departmental teams are working on. And so in the first area where we have an update is then the tax collection area, which is the first sort of group of items on the report. Continue to collect a bit of funds through the MTS collection, which is where the city splits the collections on some motor vehicle and personal property billing at 50-50 with a third-party collector. So we picked up some additional funding over the last month. But you'll probably remember from prior meetings, Leanne explaining that this is a contract that actually was not renewed from last fiscal year. So what you're seeing here, and we'll probably continue to see for a little bit, is basically the residual activity and collections on you know, bills that were already in the pipeline. So at some point for this particular item, those receipts will start to kind of peter out. You can see the list on the list, the additional grants activity.
Item number 3.
Yes, which is the next. Where's some funding from, forgive me, I'm kind of got my notes kind of scattered around here. They'll Love Hartford is a Hartford Foundation for Public Giving grant. The fire safety grant, which was a grant from I'm not sure which insurance company, but from an insurance company. Some streetscape funding through a state bond grant. And then the other one that I'll highlight is the Goodwin Park project, which is also a state grant, but I'm quickly learning that we have a robust grant identification and acquisition effort and team in place here. And so each month we're seeing a fair amount of activity here. on this item. The other area that is updated is in the workers' compensation efforts. Just noting here that we're seeing some downward trend in claims expenses for workers' comp, and our risk manager there provided a couple of data points just comparing period 4 in this year to period 4 of the prior fiscal year, which would be October, and then period 5, which is November versus November of the prior fiscal year. In both cases, the expenses are down versus prior year. So that's, for now, what appears to be a favorable trend. And we actually budgeted less in the current year and are still projecting to come in at or below budget. And then the other area, just something of an update, just a little additional information in the facility and fleet initiatives. That's a cross-departmental effort as well. Just some additional description there that's noted. Steps being taken to give the fleet manager more ability to manage and recommend the use and allocation of fleet resources. And then also just another highlight there, noting that we've had 100 employees attend defensive driving courses this year. 25 of those were yesterday that attended a class. And those are the items that we've updated this month. Continue to do that. And probably have a fresh set of initiatives as we go through the 5-year plan and budget effort.
So one question on the workman comp that and again, it might be timing, is it was noted in your financials that the net position of workman comp increased this past year versus a decrease, and even though you have these initiatives coming forward. So it was good to hear that you just said October to prior year to current year, but the end of the year results still came out with an increase versus.
I can take that, Julian, if you'd like.
Thank you.
No problem. So what you're seeing there is the result of the actuarial analysis on the IBNR for workers' comp, and it really deals with the settlement of older cases.
Okay.
Because those create a tail of payments that need to be made year over year over year. So the city's risk manager, in addition to Corporation Counsel, have made a really strong effort in trying to settle a lot of the older cases and some of the more difficult workers' comp cases, and they are making consistent headway on settling those. They just had a large settlement this week that City Council approved on a case that they've been working on for years. So I anticipate seeing a slow decline of that IBNR as we tend to settle more cases each year.
Thank you. Any questions from the members on the city's mitigation plan? All right, I see none. Then we'll move over to the next agenda item, which is other business. And I have one item of other business that is, I guess I'm going to say, great news. And Julian was not here to actually finalize this part of the project that he worked really, really hard on. So this will involve the city and Mr. Penn, and we have a fully executed contract with Milliman and that project. I know this is big deal. This is a big deal for us. I don't know. I think it took us over a year to get this done. I don't know, Julian. What do you think? A year? More than a year, huh?
Yeah, I mean, all you needed was me to get out of the way.
No, that's not the case. You actually got it pushed over the close to the finish line before departing in the holidays. So thank you for that. And we will definitely be in touch. This was just executed this week, so we'll haven't had a follow-up meeting, plan to have a meeting with Milliman, get things started, and then we'll reach out to, do we just, Mr. Penn, are you the only one? Julian, are you going to be involved with this as well, or no, because it's really focused towards the Board of Ed? I just wanted to touch base.
I think it'll mostly be me as the point of contact.
Sure.
In reality, it's going to be our outside consultant on the benefits who can coordinate all the stuff on
Okay.
records the consultants will be after in terms of information they would need to do the analysis.
Okay. Perfect.
But I'll be just as interested in the results and findings as the rest of
Yes.
the
Yes.
group.
Great. All right. Thank you. That is the only item I have for other related business. Is there any other discussion that the members have to add? No. Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
A
How about a second? Thank you, Andrea. All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you all, and very great meeting, great news. And Mr. Penn, in closing, thank you
Yes.
for your great work on the audit.
Yeah, no worries. I appreciate that. Thank you, Maureen, if she's still on too.
Okay. Yes.
Have a good day.
Maureen.
Thank you.
You too.
Good job. Welcome aboard, Andrea.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yes, welcome.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.